I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but this is not the sermon I intended to preach this morning. That happens sometimes when something changes recently or I just can't let go of something. I guess we'll find out if that how we feel about this. But what I had intended to do this morning in this series that we've been talking about being gospelized, what does it mean to embody the gospel, to become good news for others? I've been pairing some examples from the Bible, some stories, and some people, some examples from since the Bible of people in our world who have exemplified different aspects of good news for others. And the one I wanted to tell you about this morning was going to be Cesar Chavez. And if you have heard anything in the news this week, you know that probably changed my plans. If you hadn't yet heard that, that probably means you're not glued to your phone, which is probably not a bad thing. But we learned this week that there have been very credible claims that Cesar Chavez, who was an icon of the civil rights era, co-founder of the Farm Workers Association, who was a faith-based community organizer. There have been credible claims that he sexually abused young girls, and that he committed violence against women. I was really upset about that, not just because it messed up my sermon series, but I found I was really upset by that. In fact, I kind of felt a little disproportionately worked up about it, and I thought, why can't I let this go? I mean, we hear all the time about people in power doing bad things. Most of the time, I just go, well, that stinks. And then I move on. But I couldn't let this one go. It just kept bothering me. And so, as I am prone to do, I tend to then examine those feelings. Where's this coming from? What's going on under this? What is this reflecting about who I am or what I believe? And as I dug into that and spent time with God thinking about that, I realized that I was sad because I felt robbed of a hero. And I felt that there was a community of people who really deserved a hero. And that had been now taken from them. And that is when it began to click. Did you hear it? I felt robbed of a hero. I wanted my hero to fit in my image of what heroes do, of what they're supposed to do. I wanted my world to be nice and comfortable and well-defined and not to change. This was an inconvenience for me. this speaks to several really important things about our human nature, I think. And I think this is why I couldn't let it go. And I mean, why not just, okay, then move on and not bring it up at all and find somebody else to talk about? Because what usually happens when we get this kind of news, we hear about these things, we ask the question, well, does this mean that the good that he did doesn't count? Which is a faulty question. Because that assumes that the whole movement was successful because of him, one man. That assumes that he deserves credit for this whole era, something that thousands of people put their whole lives' work into. The very question of questioning our heroes, but does that mean that they didn't do good, betrays the lie that we want some nice, neat boxes and flattened people to fill them. We don't really want human beings who are nuanced and fatally flawed and all of those things. And we're kind of lazy in our thinking. We want to just see all of that through one individual. We'll just put all those ideals and hopes and dreams and progress on that one person and ignore the thousands that actually made that movement happen. And then, even worse, that whole tendency to put all of that responsibility and credit and everything onto that one great man is part of what enabled him to get access to and abuse his power. So it's all part of the same thing. And that wanting a hero contributes to the problem, to the falling of those heroes. Why am I still going on about this? And what does it have to do with being gospelized or Jesus and good news? When you think about it, Jesus was not always well received. Today we might say he was kind of a divisive figure. People had strong reactions to him. Jesus was not the Messiah that they were looking for. The one who fit the definition in the box of he was going to come on a war horse and make everything right. He was going to turn things upside down and fix this world. And when he came, and he did begin and set in motion the turning things upside down, it wasn't in the way that we expected. And it continues to defy our expectations somewhat. There's no better example than this encounter that happens, that we learn about in Matthew 15. The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 15, if we start in verse 21. From there, Jesus went to the regions of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from those territories came out and shouted, "Show me mercy, Son of David. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession." But he didn't respond to her at all. His disciples came and urged him, "Send her away. She keeps shouting out after us." Jesus replied, "I've been sent only to the lost sheep, the people of Israel." But she knelt before him and said, "Lord, help me." He replied, "It is not good to take the children's bread and toss it to dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall off their master's table." Jesus answered, "Woman, you have great faith. It will be just as you wish." And right then, her daughter was healed. Let us hear what the Spirit is speaking to God's people. That is an uncomfortable passage. That brings up some difficult questions, and it has been interpreted and commented on in a number of ways. It is not uncommon to see some Christians really wrestle with that passage and conclude based on their embedded theology that they've been taught not to question, that this could not possibly be about Jesus being rude. It must be then that he was testing her faith. And to those I say, bless your little hearts, in the most southern meaning of that phrase. Before we go any further, before any of you have any panic attacks, I need you to take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. Repeat after me. I may be uncomfortable. And that is okay. This is a deeply uncomfortable passage. It suggests, despite some of those commentators' best efforts, to deny what is pretty plainly there on the page, that Jesus tries to exclude a non-Jewish woman, a Canaanite woman specifically. They're in this region of Tyre and Sidon, which is a largely Gentile area. And Canaanite indicates that her ancestry is of the people who were indigenous to that area before the Israelites came and took that land. So Jesus then says to an indigenous woman, I'm not here for you. And I won't throw the children's bread to dogs. That is rude. I mean, there's really no other way to read it. That's rude. I would not respond as graciously as she did if someone called me or my child a dog. But you know what? She very cleverly here doesn't confront him about that, doesn't say, no, you're wrong. She says, yes, I know that you have come first to your own people, but I know also that that's not where the story ends. I know that you're better than that. You can do this. It's a valid question. Does this woman remind Jesus of who he really is? If you think, oh no, we're not supposed to ask that, we're going to get struck by lightning now, I promise you that's not going to happen, at least not because I asked that question. And I don't have a nice, neat answer for you. That's not the only way to look at it. But it's not an invalid question. It is a question that we can ask of this text. It is a logical question. It seems one way of looking at this is that she called him to step up, to live into his greater mission, which he will eventually come to say is the responsibility of his disciples to make disciples of all nations, to go all the places, to all the people. I think this is a great example for today because it makes us ask, who's gospelized here? Who is embodying the good news? Is it her? I think there's a very good argument to be made for yes. She insists that the good news is for her child too. And then Jesus is gospelized all the more. He blesses her. He heals her daughter without even being in her physical presence. This is an example of calling people in authority to their greatest potential. Instead of, we refuse to see anything else that makes this person complicated or, that could tarnish their legacy or that does not reflect well on them, thereby oftentimes pushing under the rug behavior that should not be acceptable. She's an example of approaching leadership, of those in authority, heroes, and holding them to a higher standard. You're better than that. That's one way of looking at it. And so instead of talking about Cesar Chavez this morning, should we instead talk about Dolores Huerta, his co-founder, who was so often overshadowed because she was a woman, who now we know he committed violence against her? Somebody posed that question to her as different organizations and entities have decided to cancel Cesar Chavez days or rename Cesar Chavez boulevards. An interviewer asked Dolores, "How do you feel about that? Could we just name it after you?" And you know what she said? She said, "I would rather talk about the martyrs. How about the people who died for our cause?" She deferred to Pino Contreras, Juan de la Cruz, Rene Lopez. She said, those are people who gave their lives for our cause. She, instead of saying, "Yeah, he preys on me now, I'll take his place," said, "It's not about one person. The movement is too important for that. It is about all of us, all those. Let's lift the ones who gave their lives if we have to lift any particular names." But she deferred to the collective, to the farm workers movement. I think that is a pretty good example of being gospelized. Having lived the good news, having done the hard work herself, being deserving of credit, she says, "It's not about me." She's 95 years old. And she defers to the collective. She said it's about what's good for everybody. That's a pretty good example of being gospelized. Insisting that it's not just one person who gets to be singled out, but in fact, we are all gospelized together. We do the good work. We can only rightly represent Christ to the world by working together. We don't all get there until we all get there. I hope that you have found your time this morning meaningful. I hope that you feel, even if a bit uncomfortable or shaken, that you're okay. It is okay. And I hope that you have found a place where questions are honored and where we can wrestle together with who we're called to be. If you are wondering what God might have in store for you next, where you might be on your spiritual journey, you'll find my contact information on the bottom of that prayer request page that I pointed to earlier. You can call or text or email me and set up a time for us to visit. I would love to help you discern what God is doing in your life. And if you are ready to make a decision this morning, if you want to make a decision either to give your life to Christ for the first time or to reclaim your faith, reaffirm your faith if it has been a while and there have been some bumps in the road and maybe some, places you've slipped and fallen. Or if you want to join with a community, not one that promises to be perfect, because we do not. We admit we are not always going to get it right. But we are committed to working it out together and to moving together forward in what Jesus has called us to do. If you'd like to make those decisions this morning, I would love to celebrate that with you. Please come and share that with me as we stand and sing. Let's lift our voices together once more. Thank you again for choosing to begin your week in worship with us. People of God, our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. How will we do this? By creating a connected and inclusive, Jesus-centered faith family that transforms lives.
Let us go and do as we have said. Go in peace.